Hello everyone, and welcome back to our MVVM architecture series. In our previous videos, we have covered handling exceptions, implementing GET and POST API responses, and designed a clean and readable code base. Today, we will finally put everything into action by integrating our APIs with our login screen. So, let's jump right into it. So have you remembered that on the very first video lecture we have just structured our folders according to our MVVM architecture. So in today's video we will be writing code in our repository section. So we will be creating a dart file in our repository directory which will be host repository repository.dart. Yeah. In host repository directory, we will be defining our login method and registration method, which will handle our network services. So let's just implement it, and I will be defining the code line by line. So first of all, we need to create the class, which we will be creating class OHB host repository class, and here I will be just uh, declaring a variable type of our base services class, which we have created base API services, and I will be initializing it with my network API services. Yeah, now we have just defined our base API services, which was the abstract class, and here we are handling our get API response and get uh, post API response, and we were using this base API services class in our network API services, where we were handling our whole the requests, and we were fetching the URL, and we were adding our APIs, and we were handling all the errors in our network API class. So in this today's video, we will be initializing our this variable with the base class and initializing with network API services to access our all the things of network API services in our repository class. So here I will be just defining a future function which we will be hitting our login API. So for that reason we need a future function, because uh, the internet, when we add the API, the response takes some times, and that is a future function, and that need to wait for some time. So that is the reason we use your future function. So we are getting the data in future. So I will be just creating a login future function which will be login API, and here the when it is a future function, so we need to use our async function. So I will be writing my code in the try and catch for handling the error or the exception. So that is the reason I will be writing my code by using try and catch method. So here we are done with the catch, and if any error will occur, it will rethrow it. So now let's come to our try part. We will be just defining a dynamic response, and we will be uh, fetching the API services of our network API services, which will be our when we are implementing the login and integrating the login API. So it will be our post API. So we need to send some data to our server, which will be email and password. When clicking on the login button, the data will be sent to our server. So for that reason, we will be using our get post API response. So here I will be creating a dynamic variable, which will be dynamic, yeah, and a response variable, and calling the get post API response of network API class. And in this class, we need a URL, which will be our endpoint login endpoint URL. So and we also require some data to be sent to the server. So now how can we get the URL and how can we get data? So the data will be coming from our this login screen. So we will just pass the data dynamically, and we will be getting the data from here. So for that reason, we will be calling the data. And now let's just go ahead and define our URLs, endpoint URLs. So uh, I will be defining my URLs in a separate class so that we can easily manage and access the URLs if any other endpoint we need to insert. So we can easily be able to insert the URL in our that class. So let's just create a class for our URL. So I'll be creating a new dart file in my resources directory, which will be hep url.urls.dart. So here I will be creating a class which will be hep url. You can name this class whatever you mm, prefer or whatever you like. So basically, uh, in APIs or if in any other uh, URL, the address is divided into two parts. One is the domain name, which will be the site address, and the other part will be the routing or the routes where the page should go. For example, if you take the example of Facebook, which is www.facebook.com, then if you go to the profile page, it will give a slash and your profile and another link. So that will be the route, and this will be the domain. So in defining a endpoint, so it will be our base URL, and this will be our routing URL. So we will be just adding this URL and store it in our base URL. Base URL is equal to this. Yeah. Now we will be using our endpoints in separate variable, which will be login API endpoint URL is equal to, and we will be just concatenating this base URL with our route URL. So for that reason, in Flutter we use the dollar sign and the base class, and again this API dot login, which is the route. It takes us to the login, and it will hit the login API. So yeah, now you see here you have a slash and here you have a slash. Then when it concatenates, then there will be two slash, so it will uh, take into a header. So just remove the base URL at the slash, and now you are good to go with defining the login API endpoint URL. So now you can just call your URL here, which will be uh, login API endpoint URL. So now we will be just returning this response which we have just created. So here you go. Now in auth repository class we have just implemented the login API endpoint, and where we are adding our API. So we are using the third API of this website, which is reqres.in, and we need to use the given credential of this website, which is the third party uh, API. So we are using this. So that is the reason we have implemented our URL and integrated into our application. So this is you see, this is the power of using MVVM in a single line. In a single line we have just implemented and integrated the login API for our application. So here if you want another API, for example, if we need an uh, post API or send data, we can easily write it in a single line. So you see, this is what we have just created so far. So if we need to create another method, so we will just copy this and just change the name, login to register, sorry, register API, and we will be getting the API dynamically, and we will now just be creating another URL for our register. So here we will be going to our app URL, and I will be just copying and pasting this, and I will be changing the name to login to register, and I will be just changing the path also to register. So here you go. Now we are just mm, done with implementing another um, API, getting API response, or implementing another API response. So you see how easily we have just defined another function for our register API. So if we have not done these works before, so we need to implement all these codes in our uh, auth repository for register API and login API, which cause a duplication and which violates our solid principle rules and violate the uh, object oriented rule, which is dry. So in programming we do not need to duplicate our codes, and we should not rewrite the codes. So that is the reason we use MVVM architecture, and we clean our code. So you see, now the code is very much clean and neatly, and it is uh, so clean so that everyone can read it, and the code is very much readable. So now we are done with creating our auth repository. So now let's just connect the view model with our screen. So now we need to connect this auth repository um, in our view model, and in the view model we will connect the screen with the view model. So if we click on this button, the request calls the view model function, where which we will be creating it, and in the view model the request is forwarded to auth repository, and in the auth repository when the request comes, it forwards it to our network services, which where we have implemented our all the logics for the post API response. So here you go, we will be just going and creating a dart file uh, in our view model, which will be host view model dot dart. So In this class we will be creating a class host repository. So auth view model, sorry, auth view model with the change notifier. So we will be using our provider in this class, so for not rebuilding the whole UI. So I have defined the provider in my um, provider series in very depth and clearly explained everything. So if you have not watched that series, go and first watch that series. So here we will be using change notifier, and in this class we will be using the provider consumer class and wrapping this button to consumer class to make the changes uh, smoothly. So here we will be just getting the initializing the auth repository with my variable, which will be my repo, and I will be initializing it with the auth repository class which we have just implemented. So I will be also creating a future function here, and which will be the void, and with the name will be login API. And here we will be also getting some kind of data from this class. So when we send data from this class and it comes to this data, so here we will be also passing a context, because in the UI we require to show some kind of error messages when uh, error occurs, or in if the login is successful, error message will be shown on the top of the screen. So in the previous video lecture we have just implemented our uh, utils, which were the plush bar, which a package is being used to show the messages on the screen. So this plush bar requires a context. So that is the reason we are passing a build context to use the context for our uh, plush bar. So here, as you know, it is a future function. We need to use the async method. So here we will be just calling the API here as we have just used. So here I will be using await, and I will be just calling this login API which we have just created right now. So I will be calling this login API in my this void function, which is also login API. So I will be using my repo dot login API the data. So here now we are done with calling our data, our login API. So when I click this button, the login button in my login screen, so it will be calling this login API, and the data will come into this variable, and again we will be passing this data to our this login API, which is coming from our hot repository and sending the data to the hot repository. And the data is coming here, whatever data we are passing here, and the data is coming in the auth repository, and again the old data and the URL is being passed and sent to this get post API response from our network class, and uh, it is hitting the API URL. So API server sending the data to the server. So just see how we have connected all the classes, one by one. So this is the main concept to understand how everything's are connected. So here in the future question we will be using the then function if everything is good and the API is completed, with editing or fetching the data or getting the data, so we need to show a message on the screen. So for that reason we will be using utils dot show error message. So here, you see we are using a context. For that reason the flush bar requires a context, so that is the reason we have just added a context in our login API. So now what we will be doing, the flush bar needs a title, which will be success, and a message we will be showing, so login successfully. And here we are done with this. And now if any kind of error comes, so we will be just handling that error too. So when on error, so we will be just showing the error message also. So utils dot show error flash message with the context, some kind of error. So here we will be just sending this error, yeah, error to string, and I will be just adding a semicolon. Now we are done with implementing our login API. So if we want to implement the uh, register API, so we just need to copy and paste this, and just we will be changing the name also. So in this video we are just integrating the login API. So I will be just uh, creating our login API. So here we are done. Now let's just call the login API function when we click this login button and send some kind of data, which will be our email and password. So for that we will be going to our login screen. So I'll be coming to the view and the login screen, and now we will be using the consumer, which is coming from our provider package. So first of all, we will need to, when we want to use our provider state management, so we need to first install it into our application. So for that reason, go to pub.dev and search for provider, and just click the provider and go to the installing tab and just copy this from the installing tab and go to your project's pubspec.yml file and just copy it under the dependencies. So and just save it. If the code exit code 0 comes, it means that your package is been successfully installed. So yeah, now we will be wrapping our this round button um, to our consumer widget, so we will be able to access the view model class which we have just created, which is hot view model. So let's just wrap the rounded button widget with our consumer widget, consumer, so consumer con yeah, yeah, we will be just importing our provider package, which will be provider.dart, and here we will be just now using our consumer widget, which is coming from our provider package, and it requires a builder, so a context, a value, and a child, and just we will be returning our rounded button. I will be cutting it from here, and I will be uh, pasting it here and add a semicolon here, and I will be changing this value to my whole view view model. So we recognize this, we are getting the data from our this class. So this consumer widget also requires the class name from which class we will be getting the data from which class. So we will be just providing the class name, which is hot model, and we will be getting some kind of error here because we have not uh, implemented the provider in our main.dart file. So to use the provider in our project, we need to wrap our material hub with the provider. So let's just do that. We will be using um, multi-provider, which is multi-provider, and this providers needs a list. So here we will be defining our all the providers. Uh, in the child, we will just paste the material head, and we are done with it. And now here we will just define the provider, which is the class um, for the provider we will be using. So it is our host class. So we will be using change notifier provider, and on the create property we will just define our class, which is host view model. So here we are done with providing our a class to the provider list. So we will be just auto restarting our application, and our this error will be gone. So let's just see, the error will be gone. Yeah, you see our error is resolved by just defining our provider class and providing the class, which class is the for using the provider package. So now let's just come again to the login screen. So here in the login screen, we will be calling our API login class. So when we hit this button, um, the function will be called, which is login API. So here the login API requires the data and a context. So let's just post the every page as a context. So let's pass that context. So now this login API also requires some kind of data. So the data comes from where? The data is coming from this login screen. Whatever user enter in this email or in this password, we will be sending these data into our login API. So we will be just creating some kind of data. So here we will be uh, sending the data which our API endpoint requires. So here when we are using the third-party API, so whatever data are given, so we need to provide that API. So here we need to send email and the password. So this is the key and it is the value. So the key should be the same as provided from this website. So we will be just sending using this key same as provided, which is email, and the email is coming from where? So the email is coming from our text form field, which is being stored in our controller, which is in email controller. So we will be just using our email controller dot text dot to string, and here you go, same as password, where the password is coming from, which is password controller dot text dot to string, and we are done with our data. And now I will be just wrapping this and also explaining what is happening in this whole course. So let's just test test our application. So I will be just providing the provided email address, which is heve.holt.req.res.n, and the password and is city silica. Yeah, yeah. I will be clicking the login button, and you see error during communication. So we are doing something wrong, I guess. So let's just check the email again. EVEHOLT. Yeah. So here we need hit the rate. So now I will be clicking on the login button, and you see a success message comes from our flash bar. So now here we are done with integrating the API login API into our application. So now let's I will be wrapping this up. So when I click this login button, and I will be sending these data uh, to my this login API, which is coming from host view model class, and sending this data to my host login class. So you see here, and we are getting the data from our login screen, and again we are sending these data to our auth repository class, and in the function of auth login API in the auth repository class, and again we are having the data from this login screen, and again we are sending the all data to our get post API response, which is coming from our network API class. So in the network API class, we have already defined all the logics and implemented all the logics, and we are uh, handling all the exceptions in this class. So here we go, uh, and it uh, for today. Um, we have successfully integrated our APIs with the login screen, following the principle of MVVM architecture and maintaining a clean, readable code. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video. Until then, happy coding.